More than 35% of people fail the NASM exam on their first try, and I don't want that to be you. So in this video, I'm gonna give you the top 5 study strategies to make sure you ace the exam the first time. And if you're wondering who is this guy and why should I listen to him, my name is Coach Joe Drake, and I've been running courses for organizations like NASM since 2010. And here at the Axiom Fitness Academy, AKA this channel, we've put well over 1,000 students directly through our paid programs and average over a 94% passing rate year over year. All 5 things that I'm gonna go through in this video are exactly what we do inside of our paid courses, so I can tell you with 100% certainty that they work. So imagine for a second, you're starting with a brand new client and they come in and they tell you about their goals. They want to lose weight, they want to gain muscle, whatever it is, and you start to go about training this person. Well, the first thing that you're going to end up doing is creating a structured plan, right? Obviously, coming into the gym and just doing anything is going to be better than nothing, but it's probably not going to be specific enough to get the client where they want to go in that time frame, especially if it's an aggressive goal. It's a challenging goal, right? One that they can't get to on their own. And this is probably easy to think about, but for some reason, so many students don't do this with their studies. And it's why I put the #1 thing that you need to do, the #1 strategy that a lot of people fail to do, is actually build a plan. Unfortunately, I think probably a lot of people, maybe like you, if you're enrolled in the NASM or any of the organizations, you get in and you kind of think this is going to be done for you, that you're going to get inside and the materials are going to be laid out in like a week-by-week fashion. But the truth is, they're not, right? You have all these materials and you have to figure out, what's my timeline, right? So one of the first things for you to start thinking about is, when do I actually want to test? If I want to succeed in this process, when do I want to finish? And it sounds pretty simple, but a lot of people jump in and they know that they have this 6-month timeline and they never really set a deadline anywhere in between. And that's just not really how most of us learn. You need to set an end date, really even thinking from the beginning. Now, the cool part for you guys is that this can be flexible. Most organizations, whether it's NASM or others, you're going to be able to reschedule if you need to. But I think starting with the end in mind now allows you to start to work backwards and say, okay, inside of this time frame, let's just say what I advise most students to do and what we do inside of our courses is 10 to 12 weeks. And that might even be aggressive for a lot of people, but let's just say you've got 3 months to finish and complete the certification. Now what you can do is you can actually go almost week by week and break down and find out, how many chapters do I need to specifically cover every single week, right? This is the value of having the plan, because now when you get into your week, you already know what you need to accomplish. And this becomes challenging because I know if you guys are going to get into this and get certified, you're going to be going through daily life. You're probably working full time. You might have kids, all the things in between. And so when you finally have that precious time, that 1, maybe 2 hours in a day to study, you can't afford to spend 15 to 30 minutes figuring out what to do. You've got to have the plan in place, and it really all starts here. And so again, starting with an end date in mind is great because it allows you to work backwards. The other thing that plays into this is, once you've identified that, really coming up with your weekly plan. And I'll tie this right back into my example that I gave you guys about working with a client, or maybe even for you when you've achieved some new fitness goal, you probably sat down and you planned out your workouts for the week, right? You probably love that stuff. I know I do. You literally have to apply the exact same skill set here. When you're sitting down on Sunday, you need to look at your week and say, where do I have my study blocks, all right? Maybe I've got an hour or 2 here, I've got an hour or 2 here, carve them out, but plan the week out. And then once you've got those times set aside, then you want to get super specific about exactly what you're going to do. Not just, I'm going to study, right? Because I'll tell you guys, I used to do this with clients. They would come in, we'd be working out 2 or 3 days a week, and on their off days, I would say, hey, you know what, tomorrow when you're not with me, I just want you to do some cardio. And then, come back, tell me how it went. And I just couldn't figure out why they just wouldn't do it. And then all of a sudden I decided, you know what, I'm not going to tell them just cardio, I'm going to give them something really specific to do. You're going to spend this amount of time doing this on this piece. And all of a sudden, the actual accomplishment of reaching that goal, them doing it, was way higher. So I'm telling you, same thing, you got to be specific. Like, I'm going to, on Monday, read through this chapter. I'm going to find some videos on this. I'm going to take the quiz on that chapter. It sounds a little bit silly and maybe even redundant, but that is definitely what differentiates the students that do well and those that don't. And it's also what we do inside of our courses, so I know that it works. Now, the cool thing for you guys, if you're like, Joe, I don't even know where to start, we've done a lot of this work for you guys. And so if you haven't already gotten your hands on our detailed study guide, I've gone through not only every chapter week by week and figured out all the things that you guys need to know, but also lay it out in a couple different timelines. Meaning, if you've got 6 weeks to study versus 10 weeks versus 16 weeks, you might be going through at a different pace. So if you haven't got your hands on that, check out the link in the description below. Let's move to number 2. So number 1 strategy, you gotta have a plan. And once you do, once you've got some good structure to how you're gonna approach the material, number 2 is you gotta figure out, how am I going to allow myself to learn it in multiple modes? And what I mean by this is that there is so much research out there on the education, how we learn things, that many of us may learn in different ways. And you might already be relating to this. Just the fact that you're watching this video to me says that you probably learn a little bit better like this, right? With some audio, with some video, with some visuals, something to engage you versus just reading the textbook. And I promise you, you are not in the minority. I guarantee you're in the majority. There are very few people that sit down and read the textbook and retain a high amount of information, right? Even if you did that, like if you're like me, I'm kind of an old school learner. I like having a physical textbook, but I'm also very well aware that that is not the way that I'm going to get to a higher level of understanding or retention. It might be one tool, but you gotta have some other tools inside of your toolbox. So if you're going about this process and you're just trying to read the book, and every time you get done, you're like, oh my gosh, I have no idea what I just read. And then you reread it and you reread it, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, you're spending like 4 weeks on 2 chapters. You gotta try some different things, right? Don't drive yourself crazy. Do what you're doing now. You might need to find some videos and some other resources. But as I mentioned here, just different things you guys can look at doing. I find for students, and again, this is based upon us working with close to 1,000 students inside of our paid courses, thousands of students like you getting feedback on YouTube, and I find that this, maybe even in this exact order, could be a great way for you guys to approach it. So first off, oftentimes as we're trying to learn new information, we need someone or something to simplify it, right? As you know, you're reading through the chapters, especially if you've gotten into the chapters on like the human movement system with NASM or any science chapters for any organization, you're gonna be like, man, Joe, I'm literally reading a different language. And it kind of is, right? So you being able to watch some videos where someone breaks these down, right? This is a huge component inside of our course, not only the pre-recorded stuff that we do for students to simplify what they're learning, but live conversations like this as well. Even if you're doing this on your own, you already know we've got videos out there on almost everything, right? So if you have a question about something that you're learning or a chapter, search Axiom Fitness Academy and then search that. You're probably gonna find it. So either way, I find watch something first, and then from there, now go read the material. Because the cool part is you've got more context. And this is one of the biggest things when you're really trying to solidify information. You know, chances are you're watching this video, you might be in your 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, you know, based upon the people that watch our channel and work with us in our courses. It may have been a little while since you've been in school, and you've already got a lot in your brain. So if you're going to retain anything, you have to give it enough importance. And I look at importance as context. That's why stories work so well, examples work so well, videos, visuals work so well, because we're giving our brain more stimuli to say, okay, you got to hold on to this versus just reading the material. All right, so watch and then read, because now when you go through and you read the textbook, you're like, I remember that person, or I remember this video talking about that. That makes a little bit more sense now. Then from there, and a lot of people miss out on that, especially in our digital world, I think that there's a lot of power in physically writing things out or typing things out, right? Whatever you want to do. When you guys go about taking notes, for example. I don't mean take notes on the entire book, but the important concepts, especially let's say inside the NASM material, things like the overhead squat, you know, overactive and underactive muscles, the muscular anatomy. It's going to probably be helpful to spend some time writing these things down and maybe writing them down in your own words, which takes a little bit higher level thinking. But all of a sudden, we're processing things now, and our brain's going to start to create better connections to the other things that we already know, right? We're doing educational science here. So you got to watch it. You might need to read it. Then you probably got to write down some things around it, and that may even include like the quizzes, right, where you're actually engaging with the material, testing your knowledge, and then you got to do it. You got to figure out ways like, okay, this overhead squat, like I got to get up and physically take my body through it, because when we start moving, you're a trainer. I already know it's how you learn. And if you're not inside of a course like ours, you got to figure out, how do I do it on my own? And this is what we call involved learning. And whether you want it or not, you're going to need to put in more effort. You've been given some materials. You're going to have to be very active in the process if you want to succeed at that higher level. You're watching this video though, so I know that you guys do. And then the last piece I'll say on here as well, we've got these multiple learning modes, right? Not just reading the book. We've got audio and podcasts and videos. The only downside I occasionally run into with students with videos and audio is you're doing 5 other things at the same time, right? You're washing the dishes, you're doing, walking the dog, you're doing chores, you're doing something else, or you got the video on your computer, but you're also like over here kind of like playing around on Instagram or texting or something. You need to do more focused learning. Because I promise you, as you think about all the time that you put in and how your brain's going to solidify the information, you will get much more out of that time where you're able to set aside everything. It doesn't have to be a long period, right? 15, 30 minutes. Set aside everything, focused on just the material. If it's a video you're watching, you're not taking notes on everything, but you're trying to process and take notes on what you think is important. And if it's an audio, same thing, right? You want to be undistracted and really processing and thinking about that information, because I want you guys to get the most out of the time you got. Our third most effective strategy for you guys that I know if you only chose one, this one is probably going to get you the farthest, not only with the exam, but definitely as being a great trainer, and it is mastery over memorization. Now, there is no doubt that as you guys are getting into this new thing, you might be stepping out of another career, right? You might not be used to anatomical terminology. There's going to be a level of memorization that needs to happen, right? But what we want to make sure we do is we've got to go beyond that. Too many people approach the NASM certification, they just approach certifications from a pump and dump mentality. Let me just try to cram as much into my brain. Let me just try to memorize the test questions. I'm just going to do flashcards, for like 6 hours a day. And all of a sudden, you ask them a question about a scenario that they never saw on an exam, and they're like, I don't know what to do, right? Because what you've been doing is you've been trying to memorize the information, and you're going to struggle when it comes to the exam, and you're definitely going to struggle when it comes to training, because we need to apply. And so what I have for you guys here is what we call Bloom's taxonomy. Now, a lot of people might not know, I was an education major, right? I wanted to be a high school history teacher and a football coach well before I ever even knew personal training was an option in a career. And here I am teaching in a different way. But this is not a new model, right? This Bloom's taxonomy has been taught in the educational world since like the late 50s. And what it does is it gives us a visual of how we can learn anything. Right now we're talking about personal training, and it gives us these different layers in the order in which we really need to accomplish them if we're going to get there. So at the bottom, we do have memorization. Remember, right? Just the ability to recall a fact. And that still is the foundation of where we need to go. Without a doubt, if you want to better understand things like the anterior and posterior slings of the body, right? These are concepts inside the NASM material. Well, you need to know where the lats are and what they do, and the glutes are and what they do, before you can combine them with these concepts. So without a doubt, memorization, it's going to be part of it. The downside is this is where most people stop. And part of it is because the resources you might get on your own, right? If you just have the textbook, even some of the online materials, there's not a lot of new novel questions and scenarios that might be thrown at you. So you just kind of focus on memorizing stuff, and that's all you do, which isn't bad. But I'll tell you guys right now, even just with the NASM exam, you're going to be tested at levels 2 and 3. So you got to find a way in your study approach in what you're doing to get there. Right? Obviously, these are the things that we've built into our program. It's one of the reasons that we do live interactive classes where we are on live Zoom calls with our students, why they can call in and interact with an instructor like myself, because I know that conversational piece, guys, being able to have dialogue around what you're learning is such a pivotal key piece of getting to the next layer and level, because you're able to kind of struggle through things and verbalize it out loud. Now, thankfully, when you guys are on the exam, you will have A, B, C, D. You're going to have a multiple choice exam. But what's going to happen is you're going to see questions that are beyond memorization, right? They're going to say, let's force this person to take their memorization level knowledge about the muscle spindles, right? Do I know what the muscle spindle is, where it is? Okay, that's memorization level. But what they're going to do is all of a sudden, they're going to give you a scenario about Jack, John, or Sally, and they're working on flexibility in the gym, and they're doing this thing, and all of a sudden, you've got to take your memorization level knowledge, and you have to apply it to a new situation you've never seen before. And you're like, oh crap. And this is why people talk about how challenging the exam is. And it's mostly just because they never really were forced to do that. So I feel for everyone who doesn't. But if you're not going to be involved in a course like ours, then what you need to do is you got to force some people in your life to let you teach them this stuff, right? I oftentimes get questions, even emails about like, Joe, I aspire to get to your level of knowledge and how you talk about things in the videos. And the number one thing that I'll tell them is like, well, teach it for 10 years. and you'll get there. Teaching is one of the best ways to learn things at the next level. And so, you may have some people who are interested in your life. Maybe you've got a friend. If you're investigating this training thing, you might have a friend who's also investigating it. Go through it together. Bring them in, because you guys being able to have questions and go through and problem solve one another's overhead squat is gonna be what helps you get there. And here's kind of the bonus for that, guys. This is what we do in training every single day, right? You're taking your knowledge about human anatomy, you're applying it to this new scenario that your client's bringing in today. And truthfully, for where you guys are right now, if you're watching this video, we don't need to go too far into these higher levels where you're really analyzing some of these scenarios, you're creating new thoughts in the industry. I mean, even for me, I've been training for 17 years. I don't think I'm really even there, right? I mean, so much has been created already. But we got to figure out, how do we get you to this application level on your own or inside of a group? Before I give you my fourth strategy, I want to transport you back for a second to when you were probably doing most of your learning, right? Maybe it's been a while since you were in high school or college, but if you think back to those situations, think about the scenario that you were in. You were probably with other people, right? You probably were having conversations around topics. You were minimally interacting with an instructor who maybe had assignments, there was accountability, there were exams, there was this community element to what you were doing, right? No matter where you were, that's probably how most of us spent most of our life. And for me, I think that's how humans were designed to learn. There are things that we can learn on our own, but if you go back to what we just talked about with getting to those next level, it takes dialogue and interaction. So I think one of the most powerful things you can do at this stage with number 4 is find a way to learn with others. And there's a variety of ways we could do that. I mentioned already, it might be finding someone in your life who's just interested in this stuff and who's down for you to teach them what you're learning. Love that. That's huge. Maybe it's someone else who wants to go through this with you. Could be a loved one, could be a friend. But for many others, maybe it's just even engaging with communities that are out there. This is the number one reason that we built our NASM free Facebook group. So if you're watching this video and you're not already inside there, make sure you check out the links for this video, because you'll get access. And there are so many great conversations that happen inside of there. Obviously, we run paid courses for students year-round, but we love just getting more students together, those who want to get into the field, and trying to provide free resources. And so there are so many students that have taken our courses, passed the exam, offering advice. I mean, literally dozens of questions inside there every single day. So whether you join our Facebook group or another group, just know that I think this community aspect is really, really important. And for a lot of students who get through the material in a timely fashion, they need that, right? I think there's social learning, maybe setting up study groups, working with other people. If you know that you need those things, that helps to create more accountability in the process. The other piece of it as well is I find, for a lot of people, when you're learning this stuff on your own from the computer, it can feel pretty isolating, where you're like, man, I am dying right now. Like, I'm trying to learn all these terms. And so sometimes even just knowing that there are thousands of other people out there in the exact same place that you are, probably struggling with the same stuff, it's kind of comforting, right? And I think for a lot of us, we need that in order to continue to move forward, because it's going to be challenging no matter how you go about it. And I think for a lot of us, having that kind of support can be helpful. And then even just literally informational support, being able to lean into other people who have already done what you're trying to do is key. It's pivotal at every stage of your career. And so if you know that there's resources out there right now, then don't hesitate to lean into them. Like you can see here with my sweet smiley faces, you're gonna be much happier in the process, and you're probably gonna get through it faster. Strategy number 5 that you absolutely need to start doing from day number 1 is quiz often and quiz early. And this includes the practice exams that you guys will have access to. I already know you probably have, exam anxiety. A lot of people do. And so some people, that leads them to kind of avoiding some of those quizzes. They're like, you know what? I'll take the quizzes once I've gone through all the chapters. Bad strategy. And the reason is because what we have found after running courses, I've been specifically teaching the NASM curriculum with Axiom since 2013, 14. What we have found is that this is one of the best ways also to study what you don't know and keep you on track with what's the most important information. All right, so after tracking students, especially since 2017, what we have found is that if you are close to, plus or minus a couple percentage points, to an 80% score on your practice exam with no help, then it's like 100% pass rate. And I'm telling you, this is consistent every single time. So if you're watching this video and you're thinking about reaching out to me and you're like, Joe, like I want to take the exam soon, but I'm at like a 65 or a 70% on the practice exam, my response to you is going to be, don't take the exam yet. Because I'm pretty consistently right on with the fact that if you're not close to that 80 or above, you're not there yet. So just so you guys know, you need to get a 70% on your real exam. And so what we have found is that you want to have this like 8 to 10% buffer score in between. All right. Now, what's going to happen, guys, is you're not going to see these quiz questions on your exam. It's never going to happen, right? That's not how the exam writing process works. So don't go through and quiz and then think like, oh, I'm going to see these same questions. That's not the purpose. What it's going to do, though, is it's going to make sure that you're focused on the right material, because you might not see the same questions, but you will see the same concepts. So you know, if I'm seeing enough of the overhead squat and underactive and overactive muscles, and I'm seeing these certain things on plyometrics, well, you know those are going to be the main concepts that are tested over, probably in a different way on the exam, but it's going to help make sure that you're hitting the right stuff. So without a doubt, as you guys go through, you don't have to go crazy, right? If you watch enough different videos, you might hear people that took the practice exam 25, 30 times. I think that's probably overkill. That might stress more of you guys out. But reasonable to say you might take it like 3, 4, 5, 6 times by the time you're done, just to know what do I need to focus on. Because what you'll do on the practice exam, as well as your chapter quizzes, your section quizzes, is after you go through them, you're going to get a sense of like, how much did I retain, right? I got maybe like a 70%. Okay, cool. Now what you get to go do is you get to go back through and study what you didn't get right. And that's going to continue to take this large body of knowledge that you don't know and shrink it week over week, right? You continue to fill in these gaps until you get to the exam and you're like, cool, I feel good with everything. So your key there is going to be go through, take your quizzes, do them every week with the chapters you get through, and then use those to study the things that you just don't know and then move on. And it literally is just that simple. It's exactly what we do with our students. And as I mentioned when we started this video, 94% pass rate on the first try. And this is probably one of the #1 strategies. So it's going to help you guys decrease testing anxiety because we're just getting practice. We're getting practice. And so early on, you might take some practice exams with notes, but then at the end, you got to take it like it's the real thing. Sit down, 2 hours, no help, and just test yourself to know that you're there and you're ready. And obviously, a lot of this hinges on the fact that like, hey, you got to set the test date. So if we've gotten to a 0.5 here and you haven't already thought about it, you need to, because this is going to help us understand and know, am I actually ready? And also, I need the accountability. For many of you guys, actually setting up the exam date, working backwards to get there, it's exactly what you need. So don't avoid it. Take the quizzes every single week and live and die by getting 80% on the practice exam. I hope you were able to take some notes from this video because, guys, this is exactly what we do with students inside the Academy. It's not sexy, it's very simple, but it works. So if you're going to continue to go this process on your own, commit to doing these things, and I promise you're going to be much more prepared when it comes exam day. And if you've gotten to the end of this video and you're thinking, I don't know that I want to do it on my own, then just know you don't have to. We've been NASM's #1 licensed partner academy for quite some time. We've been running courses since 2014. We've got a process that works, and we have an involved process as well, where students get to interact with myself and instructors on a weekly basis. So if you're interested in getting more information on the virtual classroom, click the link below to find out more, and I'll talk to you soon.